Welcome to Behind the Bookshelf podcast. I'm your host, Emily Vale. This is a place where we hold a candle flame to pages, get the inside scoop from published authors and other industry professionals. Here you'll learn the inspiration behind stories, get to know the author, learn their process, and be part of relevant conversations around literature. Take a seat, grab a book. We're going behind the bookshelf. Today I'm joined by romantic fantasy author Orin Steele, who can be found under the near-constant cover of Clouds and Rain of the Pacific Northwest. She can be found hiking in the mountains with her family or cozied up under a blanket, reading an epic fantasy. Orin writes deeply flawed characters who have to discover the cost of becoming who and what they are meant to be. I have Orin Steele with me today, so first of all, thank you for taking some time out. I feel like you've been super busy with your release.
Yeah, things have been crazy, but very excited to be here. Thank you so much for reaching out. I'm genuinely excited to chat.
Yeah, absolutely. So, speaking of your new release by Blood, Shadow, and Fire, I'm on chapter 27 right now, and I'm loving it. So I know it just released on April 28th, which was just over a week ago. So I want to know, how did you celebrate your release day?
Oh my gosh. It was so funny because, we had the pre-release party. So it was like the soft launch, for the book. And that was so chaotic in the best way. And I was like so busy and lost and bound. Portland's first mobile bookstore joined us at Brewhouse Brewing. And it was just such a fun, community event. And so I feel like I really got to, rip the Band-Aid off, before, the actual launch even happened. And so I got out so many of, my nerves and, I had to, perfect, engaging with people and, having conversations and answering questions. And I kind of got to do, my practice run before actual launch night. And so when I woke up the morning of launch, my husband's like, "You're published, congratulations." And he's like, "How does it feel?" I was like, "I don't know. It's Tuesday."
Yeah.
And it was such just a normal day because my launch day party wasn't until 6 p.m. I worked and I was just like, "No, this is fine. Everything's fine. This feels so normal." And then of course I got there. And, people started showing up and they're like, "Oh my God," and then they start sharing how much they love the book or what the book means to them or their favorite parts. And it's it hits me all over again. Every single time I talk to someone else about the book, I get very emotional. It was a very normal day until I got there.
I was actually talking to somebody about that on the last episode, and the term the calm before the storm, but I feel like it's the opposite. It's the storm and then it calms down. So sometimes I feel like releases can feel a little anticlimactic because you've done so much leading up to it.
That's really it. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, so it doesn't lessen the experience, but it's just takes a second for it to settle. Yeah, you are published, but so that sounds really cool. I was paying attention to your social media and I saw that you did the brewing company, and they're friends of yours, right? Or did you come upon that collaboration?
Yeah, so we have actually been going to Brewhouse since we moved back to the Northwest a year and a half ago. And we're just regulars. We truly love being there. We love the people there. They are really a community first business, and that really shows in just the way that they operate. And we love supporting places like that, and we love spending time in businesses like that. And they're just really awesome people. And as soon as they found out that I was writing a book, they were all in. I was doing my first round of self edits in my spiral bound draft. And they were all like, "Oh, you're having your release party here, and you're gonna do all of this stuff, and we're gonna make a beer." And I'm going, "Guys, I don't even know if I'm publishing this at this point. I think I had just started querying." And they're like, "No, you will publish and you will have your party here and we will be doing a beer." And I wasn't sure I actually believed them until they finally set a date to be like, yeah, come out and brew with us. And I was like, this is a dream come true. And something that a lot of people don't know about me is that I spent, oh gosh, a decade, 11 years actually, working in and alongside the craft beer industry in like branding and marketing and design. And so this was like truly like a full circle moment for me to be able to like participate in the brewing process for a beer with my name on it, which is, it was like, it was so fulfilling in like a spiritual way.
That is full circle. I know that you have to keep more than one of those cans probably and like put it up on your shelf.
We have many. I do have one sitting on my shelf right now.
I love that. I mean, community is so important, and that's really special that you had that experience for sure.
Yeah.
So you had a successful debut. You've been sharing a lot of it, on social media, just your journey. And before it was released, your book was in Waterstones, Powell's Books, over 500 pre-orders. So first of all, congratulations.
Thank you.
The success doesn't come without hard work. So I want to ask you, what would you credit that success to?
Insanity in a way.
Yeah.
And I really think that you have to be willing to do things that a lot of people aren't willing to do. And it's hard. It is really hard. Like it's like it's hard work. It's a lot of late nights, long hours. I made this my full-time job. I was incredibly lucky that I was in a position where I was already working from home, and I had been running my own business for 9 years when I started this. And I was able to kind of make that shift and take on less client work and take on more writing. But I really think to be able to build an entire world and then have to like market it, it's a special kind of animal. And I yearn for the days when writers could just be like hobbits who lived on the side of a mountain because I would love to do that, but that is just like not the world we live in, and especially not for indie authors, where the only way that so many people find us is through social media. And so I had to take on this secondary role of being a social media presence, and that in itself is a full-time job. And so when I say like hard work, long hours, but also incredible teamwork after I found Emre, I could not have gotten to the reach that I did without their help. And knowing that even on like the days where I was like, I need to shut down for a second, those were few and far between because I'm a control freak. But on those days where I just, said, I have to breathe for a minute because I am still human. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, like I am a friend, and, life is continuing around me, and we still have to stop for those things. Like I've stopped this week. It's my daughter's birthday is this weekend, and we're throwing a big party at the house here. So it's like, I'm not working on the book. I'm not working on social media. Like I'm planning a 9-year-old or soon to be 9-year-old birthday party. And so all of these things, they just kind of commingle, and like they have to coexist. And I think the indie authors, who find like that following and like find that success, like we're willing to put in incredibly long hours, and that's not for everyone, and that's completely okay. I knew it was for me because I knew that this was what I desperately wanted. And I think we all have to have, we all have that moment of like, what are we willing to do like when we're desperate for something? And I found out, and the limit unfortunately for me does not exist. Like what I'm not willing to do.
When the passion is there, certainly, I mean, it's time and effort, it's hard work, like things just aren't given to you. You do have to work for it, and there's a lot of strategy that comes into it. Branding, marketing.
And I'm incredibly lucky that I had people who on those days where I was like, enough for me. No, thank you. Like, I still had people working, I still had Leanne and Shelley making these connections for me. I mean, I truly, they are why I got into Powell's. They are why I was at, Waterstones, because they were behind the scenes pushing it. And I am so, so grateful to have such incredible people working in my corner.
Yeah, that's definitely worth mentioning, because one person doing it is not always, we might assume it's one person, but a lot of times people have teams with them too, and they have that support to back them up.
Yeah.
So.
And what I was able to achieve because I wasn't doing everything.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to do everything by yourself, and I think a lot of indie authors put that on themselves for sure, to bear all of the weight.
And that's hard. That's harder than what I did. I have so much respect for indie authors and self-published authors, because you're carrying that weight by yourself, and it was something I was willing to do, and I had started going down that path after deciding that I didn't want to query anymore. But I'm so grateful that Emory came in and swooped me up at the last minute.
Yeah, and this wasn't on the predetermined list of questions, but you mentioned querying, and I'm just a curious cat.
Yeah.
I know some people go into it like, oh yeah, I'm going to self-publish. I'm not interested in trad. But you were at some point. So, like,
I was.
Where did that shift for you? What was that discovery of like, you know what, I'm gonna do this indie?
Oh my gosh, yeah, that's actually a really good question, because it was a very definable moment for me, and I don't know if everyone has that. For me, there was a very clear turning point, and I had been getting rejection after rejection after rejection, and I knew it was a dark story, and I knew it was going to get darker. It gets worse before it gets better, and I knew that I wrote it for myself, and I got to a point where, and this is my husband actually asked me this question, and he said, how much are you willing to change the story to sell it? Mm-hmm. And I sat there, I was like, oh my God, I'm not. I'm really not. And, I'm absolutely willing to add to it or tweak it, but like the main undertone of the story, the pain in the story, the trauma in the story, I realized like those were hills I would be dying on. Mm-hmm. And that wasn't necessarily commercially marketable. And I had to have like a very real, very honest conversation with myself of like, okay, if this isn't working, I haven't found the right person to see the vision, then I would rather go at it alone than completely chop up the story to make it commercially marketable. And there are people who write to sell books, and that's great. I would love to make this a career someday, I would love to make this like my absolute, full-time pay the bills job. But most importantly for me at this time is to write the story that I need to write. And anything other than the book that I was able to put out with Emory wouldn't have been the story that I needed to write. And so I said, yeah, I will do it. I'll do it myself. I went through my first round of developmental edits with my first editor, Kathleen Fox, and she was incredible. And she was, she helped me really like hone in the story. And, it wasn't right for traditional publishing right now, and that was okay. So it was really that moment of like, no, like I need to tell this story regardless, and if I have to do it myself, I will. But Emory found me right before, and they said, hey, we'd actually love,
and they believed in it. I'm glad that you first of all shared that with us, but to your point about something being commercially marketable and you knowing that this was a personal story you were telling, something you believed in and you didn't want to change it, that is something and it's interesting because we see some books that are just like, whoa, they went there, but then we see some books where the trauma is so doled down to make it commercially marketable. And so it's a really interesting dynamic, what we see out there. But I will say, I read a lot of horror. I read dark fantasy. And so the dark elements. I just think because it makes, which there's lightness in it too. It's so well rounded. But that's what drew me into By Blood, Shadow, and Fire was the darkness and the visceral, just like emotion that I could tell was like palpable from the cover, from the opening pages. So I adore that you stood true to yourself.
Yeah, I appreciate that because yeah, it was a bit of a struggle there for a little bit. But it all came from, a very real place within me. And yeah, I mean it's an incredibly vulnerable thing to do, to query at all, especially when the story is something personal. And to find partners who were like, hey, like, we see what you're doing, we like it. And I remember specifically they said, we're not afraid of the dark.
That's something that stays with you.
I was like, I need that. And that's truly, it's like, that's when I was like, oh, I found it. This is it. Like, I don't need to hear anything else. And at that time I had another agent looking at it who was very interested in it. And I was just like, no, I need people who are willing to just like hold my hand and walk into this with me. And I knew I found that with Emre. So I was very, very thankful that I found them when I did.
I love that. So you've told us that it's a very personal story. Can you tell us so this is, if anyone doesn't know, this is a duology or it's a series? It's the
trilogy. Yeah, so it's a planned trilogy.
Okay. So what inspired the Severed Oath series, or By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, however you want to answer that question?
Yeah, so in writing it, I was actually bullied into writing it by my best friend. But no, growing up, I grew up in church, and I think that is where a lot of my personal trauma came from. And
girl.
Yeah, it's like I feel like I have to be like a little careful sometimes talking about it.
Yeah.
Because that was not my journey. And there was a lot of hurt, and there was a lot of anger and confusion, and especially then when I deconstructed from religion as a whole, I was left with a lot of questions and left with a lot of guilt and confusion. And so when I started writing, about the gods, it just morphed into this story of, text being intentionally misinterpreted and like mistranslated for manipulation. And like it really snowballed into this, I'm trying to think about the right way to say this that isn't going to come off aggressive. But for me, it was my deconstruction and like my healing journey and finding the power within me instead of putting the power into something else, and being okay with who I am at my core and not having to find external validation, and just finding that validation within myself. And and then there's a lot of other life traumas woven in there, but that was primarily the source for this main series.
Yeah, and I really relate to that. There's a similar theme to the book that I released, which is so different from yours. But I think, I didn't go into mine knowing that, but it's interesting whenever you have these traumas or things that you've worked through as a person, sometimes they bleed into your work or they influence your work. So I'm interested to like keep reading and then connect those dots, because that's not something that I had picked up yet in chapter 27.
Yeah.
But after I'm not critically reading it right now. I think after you read a book and you sit with it, you're like, oh, okay, this and this and this and this. Right now I'm on the ride.
Yeah. That's completely fair. Because it started, the initial, like, these first seed idea started from a D&D character that never got played. But the initial premise was just like this deal gone wrong with the gods. And I was just like, oh my God, is that just like not, is that not just religion? Is that like, there is no good deal?
Do you play D&D?
We are planning a game with some friends right now. I have never actually played, but I desperately want to play. I know way too much about it for someone who has never played.
I know nothing about it besides what was on Stranger Things, but I would absolutely love to play it because it looks and sounds so fun. I mean, you're just making up a fantasy.
That's literally it. And for me, like, that is so exciting because I love the idea. I mean, and I think this is how I started writing this novel in the first place. Like, even just like entertaining, being willing to entertain the idea of writing. But like, I love when I'm reading, I love stepping into another character and like thinking about like, oh, like, would I make the same decision? It's like, oh no, like I can't think from my perspective. I have to think from their perspective. Like, and you know, they're very different from me. And it's like, okay, it's like, you know, that I start going into backstory. I'm like, okay, like what made them the way they are? And I did that with Eastland. I went to like her parents. And so this is how I started writing her parents' origin story and like how they met. But I had to think about, you know, like what type of people raised this person, you know, what type of parents would make this person the way they are, you know, and what type of childhood and, you know, what were they like when they were young, and, you know, what led them to be the types of parents that they are. And it just, I can't stop. Mm-hmm. So there are going to be multiple in-world standalone books because I can't stop
you get in
snowballing.
There.
Yes.
Yeah. You're like mapping out the entire world. I love it. Yeah, and deeply understanding why people make the choices that they do based on their experience in the world, certainly. So I want to move on to this next question. I find, speaking of inspiration, I find many authors are inspired by real life settings they're familiar with. And I know you live in Washington, right?
Yes.
So which I used to live there. I move around like all the time, but I lived there for 3 years, just south of Tacoma. But I want to know, do your surroundings inspire your setting in any way? In this crazy fantasy world that is so dynamic?
Yes. So I love the world. I really do. And I love all of the different unique, you know, cultures and rituals and people across the world. And so in my 7 nations, I had to do some mental, I was like, no, there is 7, right? In my 7 nations, you know, a lot of them they're all inspired by like regions or like, you know, cultures and communities across our world. And so it's not quite a one-to-one, but Nankari, which is where they spend most of their time in book 1, you know, Eastland and Ferric. It's very much based on like Western America, like Northwestern America, you know, Montana, Idaho, Washington, Oregon. And so of course, like they spend most of their time there. And like when they're under the giant evergreen trees, I'm thinking about the evergreen trees that are in my backyard.
Yeah.
You know, I'm
totally
thinking about
pick that up.
Yes,
under the stars and the tents.
When we go hiking, it's like the waterfalls and the sounds, and we have a very large green space around us, which is amazing. We have a big pack of coyotes that live near us, and I love it so much I wrote it into the book. I love the sound of them like yelping and like screeching at each other, and like it wakes me up sometimes at like 2:00 in the morning because they're, you know, yelping so loud, or, you know, it's like it sounds like they're just in my yard, and I love them and I love that, and it's a very haunting but like comforting sound to me, and I love that connection with nature, and so I try to write them in nature as much as I can because that's where I spend so much of my time. So like for me, it's so much easier for me to write them out in a forest than it is like when they're like in the cities, because I'm just like, I don't know, I try not to exist in cities.
Yeah, I relate. I grew up in Louisiana, and when you were talking about the coyotes, I just like, it brought me back there, just like sitting on your back porch listening to the coyotes yell. It is very peaceful. And I'm a big fan of all the forest scenes that you were talking about, and I'm eager to explore the rest of the world that you wrote as I get into the book and you continue the series. So speaking of a continuation of this, what can we expect to see from you in the future? I mean, I know that you're coming out with 2 more books, but kind of, can you tell us anything?
Yeah, so there are two more books in the Severus series. There is a lot of trauma, so apologies ahead of time. I am also working on, right now, Elena and Kuana's story, which is Cecelin's parents. So their origin stories and a little bit, about their life and, how they got to where they are. And then I have at least two more in worlds that it's like the same thing. Like I get so connected to these characters, and I absolutely love my Discord channel. I love everybody in there because they will like sit there and be like, we need more. We need more on this character, and we need it yesterday. So like, when's the book coming out? And this is not a spoiler at all, but Islin's brother Alexei is dead before the story starts. And, we get these little glimpses of him and, the type of brother he was. And he is like everyone's favorite character, and I love that because he's also one of my favorite characters. But I have had such an outrage that there is not more of Alexei. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I get that. He's not physically there, so I can only give you so much of him. But the people have demanded at least a novella of him being alive. And so I have already started that.
Yeah, because we miss him so much without really knowing him. But I love to hear that you're exploring more in world. So I think everybody is super excited to see that.
I'm not leaving the world. Well, actually, that's not true. I was just about to say I haven't left the world yet. That's not true. There is another story. I don't have a lot of information on it, but it's actually an idea older than By Blood, Shadow, and Fire. But I've been holding on to it because I knew that it wasn't right for my first book. Mm-hmm. And I knew that I wanted more experience under my belt first. It will not be a happy ever after. And so I was like, I can't debut with like a tragedy.
Yeah. Interesting. Thank you for sharing that with us. I'm totally understanding, like, yes, your world, the world inside of your head with all this is an expanse. It's never ending.
It really is. And like, that's how I ended up with the codex at the beginning of the book. Because I was writing so much in my notebook of like, okay, this is this nation, this is their god, like their patron deity, like this is like, how they worship, just to keep it straight in my head. And like I have like a big felt board that sits in front of me, and I just had all these like little note cards all over the place, and I was finally like, I just need to type it up into a document. And I sent it over to Emre, and they were like, why are we not putting this in the book? And I was like, oh no. Oh no, it wasn't meant to be.
Yeah, because the people need references.
Yes. And I've gotten so many people saying like, oh my God, like I'm so glad to have it. Like it's just something nice to go back and reference, or, it's just an added layer, because I love, in like the books that I read, I love rich world building. And because I want to get lost, like I want to get out of here, and I want to get into the story. And so to be able to have that, and we explore so many other nations in book 2, and I'm very, very excited for what we're going to explore in book 2. But I wanted people to be able to have this reference of the world, because it truly is like never ending in my own head. And so I needed some people to come and live in there with me.
Yeah, it totally makes sense. Whenever it is so rich, and it's like in these fantasy worlds, you're building an entire world, you're building religion, you're building language, you're building culture. And so it is not, I appreciate it. I appreciate to have that. So let's do something fun. I'm interested to see how you're going to answer this, because being that I am on chapter 27, there might be some characters that you named that I'm not aware of. So your characters in By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, kiss, marry, kill.
I should have prepared for this one. I remember seeing that in here. I was like, ooh, that I have not thought about.
And you don't have to elaborate if you don't want to. You can make it simple for us.
So I'm trying to. So my answer for book 1 is different than my answer for the series.
Okay, give us the answer for book 1 then.
So for book 1, oh my gosh. I mean, I think I would have to marry Varric, honestly. Like, so much of him and the way that he loves Eastland is based off my husband. And so, like, that's an easy one. Oh my God, who would I think I would kiss Beltherac, because there's just, listen, listen, he's not like a forever, but like, you would have a lot of fun for a little bit, until he does his Beltherac things. Yeah. We get a lot more of him in book 2, and then I will say, like, book 3 is his book.
Okay.
So we get a lot more of him. I'm very excited to explore that. And then I'm killing Ronak.
Okay.
He's a bully. He's a bully, and I don't like him, and he's egotistical, and he's very stubborn and set in his ways, and I have no patience for that.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask you to confirm or deny, but I feel like that is going to stand. That is going to be a standing answer to kill him.
I will say that is correct.
Okay. I think you make it pretty clear, like in the book, it's pretty clear.
Yeah,
like, where's
he's
the
pretty
redemption?
like irredeemable.
Yeah.
But
absolutely.
I will say, and this is not a big spoiler, we do get a lot of context for
good.
how he became the way he is in book 2.
I'm glad
so
you do that.
Maybe not empathy, maybe not even like sympathy, but understanding.
Yes, because with an antagonist, we need, again, going back to why people the way they are, how they've stepped through the world, I love to get down to the root of why an antagonist is evil. Yeah. So I'm glad that you give us that. So moving on to the next question. What do you hope people take away after reading By Blood, Shadow, and Fire?
Oh, man. I think I've answered similar variations of this question, and the thing that I keep thinking that I'm going to change my answer, and I don't think I am. I think the biggest takeaway that I hope people have from this and from the series as a whole is that just because you are the monster in someone else's story, it does not make you a monster. And it certainly doesn't make you the monster of your own. Sometimes we have to make difficult decisions that are for us. And we have to put ourselves first. And we have to do what's right for us. And that's not always a bad thing. And it's not always a selfish thing. And, like, it's okay to do that. Even if it's uncomfortable.
Yeah. I like that answer.
That was a lesson I had to learn.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, two people can read the same book and they'll take something different away, but I always appreciate to hear from the author what your intent is, or what one of your intents are.
Yeah, that was the biggest thing I had to learn over the last, 10 years. And especially being a parent now myself, I really had to think about, what lesson do I want my daughter to be raised with, and that very much has held true.
Yeah, becoming a mother or a parent, period, especially when you've had a background where you've had to unlearn or deconstruct, it changes your worldview so much and really makes you think about what kind of lessons that you need to help this child understand.
Yeah. And a lot of that is strength and independence and asking questions and pushing back and critical thinking and distancing yourself from things at times and people when need be, and that it's all okay, and it's okay to change your mind, and it's all of it.
I love that. So I want to know, what is the last book that you read?
Oh my gosh. Okay. I have not read nearly as much as I would like to. The last book that I have finished was Fine, Fine, Fine by C.B. Woods. I am not usually a contemporary romance person, but the way that she writes trauma, it was such a perfect crossover, and because I like to hurt a little bit when I read. Sometimes I just read for the fun of it, but most of the time I read to feel something. Yeah. And I felt so deeply with both of the, I don't know if you've read it. I felt so deeply with both of those characters that I almost forgot it was a contemporary romance. I loved it. It was a very good time. CB and I are friends, so take that with a grain of salt. I absolutely loved it though.
Well, that's good to hear.
I'm biased.
Yeah, I do read for a similar purpose. I was asking one of my guests, like, if you were to, like, trade places with a character that you read, who would it be? And they flipped it on me, and I'm like, I can't answer that question because I don't want to trade places with anybody that I read about.
Absolutely not. Absolutely not.
So this is a question that I ask everybody because there is a lot of darkness in the world, and I like to hear good stuff. So what is something that brings you joy right now?
Oh boy. So I have, oh gosh, I have events almost every weekend until late June. And so far, my favorite thing has been going to events and like actually like talking to people about the book. And I have heard so much incredible feedback on the story, but also just people saying like, hey, like, this happened to me and I really resonated with this part of it. And again, like, it's been out a week, or just over a week. And so a lot of these were ARC readers who have had it for months at this point, who have some of my beta readers have read it like 5 or 6 times, and like different versions. And one of them actually flew out from New Hampshire for the pre-release and launch party.
Wow.
And it was so cool to be able to like sit with her in person for the first time, and with someone who has been there since the first draft. And so I think that connection, that like in-person connection, has really been like refilling me, from just like the daily grind of like, okay, I need to get a social media post out. I need to, which I have not been great at doing. I need to like, make sure I'm on top of my emails. What events do I have coming up? What's going on with here? What's going on here? And, just connecting with people really does like refill my cup in a really, really like heartwarming way. And so that is what I look forward to continuing to do, hopefully for a very long time.
Yeah, I like the way you put that, refilling your cup, because it does make all of the hard parts worthwhile, and there's not a lot of stuff to compare that feeling to, that someone tells you that they understand what it is that you did, and they perceive your art in the way that you intended, and they feel it the same way you do.
Yes, as a girl with an art degree, I remember making pieces in college, and it was so hard because I'm like, nobody's gonna connect with this, like nobody's gonna, it's like nobody sees in this what I will want them to, and because art is so subjective, and of course reading is subjective as well, but I feel like when I'm actually able to put into words, instead of a painting that I'm like, I don't know, it's a crumpled truck, what do you want from me? But when I can actually make my words the art, like I feel like people are connecting with it in a much deeper way, and I love that, because I figured out, wow, like, okay, this is how I find that connection, this is how I find those threads with other people.
So you've talked about having an art degree, marketing. So when did you start exploring writing creatively?
Yeah, so I started writing as a kid, like very informally. I never took a writing class. I failed English. I was not the model student. But I journaled a lot. In college, I had a very angsty blog where I would write very passionately just about, I mean, anything, just being a woman and religion and parenting, especially around the time that I got pregnant. And I feel like so much of me changed in that time. And I got a lot angrier, I think, because I started, really worrying about another human being. And I started looking at my life a lot more critically. And so I blogged and I journaled, and so it was always there. You know, I wrote silly little poems here and there. So it was always kind of there in the background. But this is truly the first undertaking like this, that I've ever attempted. And I am so, again, I'm going to keep circling back to how grateful I am for Emre, because they really helped me through this process. And I was a very insecure, I realize now, I was a very insecure writer, and I over described things because I was like, well, if I don't do it, like they're not going to get it because my writing's not good enough, on its own. And, they were able to go through, my two editors, Shelley and Aaron, they were really able to go through and be like, hey, no, like, you're good. Like, you've said what you needed to say here. We don't need the next two paragraphs where you're like doubling down on things. There was when she is in what city is it? One of the cities in Nankari. I can't remember the name of it off the top of my head, and I'm getting a really big map printed for my office
so
it can
not
just
blame
sit in
you,
front of me.
because how could you store all that?
Kirk, that's the name of the city. But she's there and she meets Makia for the first time. And I think I spent like 3 or 4 paragraphs describing his shop and like the trinkets on the shelves and, the barrels of grains and, just like the way that, the wood was worn in just so, and, like this, and they were like, we don't need it. Like, let the reader fill that in. Yes, I go into a little bit of atmospheric detail, but that's part of the fun in reading, is as the reader creating this image in your mind. And I was so worried that I wasn't a good enough writer to give that I overcompensated.
I think every writer, you continue to learn with every book.
Yeah.
And if you stop learning, you're doing something wrong.
I agree.
So, I mean, I don't want to call it imposter, but I mean, I felt that. I think a lot of people do feel that. And it's important to know that nobody just sits down and writes a finished book. That's what editing is for. Oh. But, I mean,
the imposter syndrome, it is insane because, people are putting me up next to some, incredible authors. And, I just did like an AMA on my Instagram stories. And somebody asked me, they're like, how does it feel to like see your name next to like really established fantasy writers? And I'm like,
you're like, don't ask me that question.
I was like, I don't feel like I deserve to be there, which is like, it's crazy, but people are putting me on this pedestal that I would never put myself on. And I don't want to be on a pedestal. Like, that sounds really scary.
Yeah.
I am so proud of what I accomplished, and I am so honored that so many people have resonated with it and love it. I literally have it sitting here, and it's beautiful and it's stunning, and it's so cool to hold it in my hand. But then there's still part of me, and this is like, I've started writing book 2 and it's outlined at this point. But to get real with you for a second, I haven't actually started drafting it because I'm so scared that I'll never be able to do this again.
Yeah, whenever you have such praise, I mean, there's an expectation that you feel, right?
Yeah, and I'm scared. And that is like kind of a weird feeling for me because there are not many things in my life that I am like truly fearful of. And like, I am like truly like right now fearful that like I'm going to be a one-hit wonder.
You won't be.
But then it's like at the same time, like I did it once, I can do it again.
Yeah, but it's valid.
It's me.
Yeah,
but it's getting out of my own head because then I've already written a bonus chapter for By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, and it's Ferrick's perspective of when they first meet, and I wrote it in an evening sitting with my best friend. It's like, so I know I can do it. Yeah. I just have to like sit down and be like, all right, here we go again, Yeah. But I've just had that fear to start, and I'm struggling right now to push through that. So I'm trying to give myself a little time off. I'm trying to give myself, time to just be mom for a little bit. And, next week is a new week, and I'm really going to try to dedicate some time to just sitting down and letting it be bad. You know, like letting like that first draft just like, okay, if it sucks, it sucks. So like I can fix something that sucks. I can't fix nothing.
Absolutely. The ideas have to get there first. I
Yeah.
appreciate you being vulnerable because that's something that everybody needs to hear. That's
Yeah.
other authors.
It's a very normal feeling.
Yeah, it certainly is. But I'm super excited to see what comes next and follow your journey and finish this book. So, where can readers find By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, and where can they follow you?
Yeah, we are available pretty much everywhere but Amazon. We platform everywhere but Amazon. Amazon did take the book from Ingram, which is a whole other fight that we are trying to fight. And they are legally allowed to do that, even though we don't want it there.
Right.
But yeah, you can find it directly from Emre. You can find it at Powell's. You can find it at Barnes & Noble. You can find it at Waterstones. There's another international bookstore that we're available through. We are working on Indigo in Canada. All of the links are in my link tree on Instagram and TikTok at Actually Orin.
Perfect. All right. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, and
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, and I feel like you gave us so much behind the scenes stuff, so I appreciate it.
I am, no pun intended, an open book. I love talking about it.
Thanks for listening. As mentioned, you can go check Orin out on her social media, and if you're interested in By Blood, Shadow, and Fire, support Indie and go get her book through their select retailers. Stay tuned. Next week, I'm going to be joined by another author who just debuted a Western fantasy titled My Dear Flinchy. It is quirky, it is about a magical cow, and I am excited to learn more about it.